This episode of In the Gun, the 2014 college football playoff is inevitable. Jed and I will dig into the details and also a big week ahead for WVU baseball. All that and more on this episode of ITG.
Caution, this podcast contains bad jokes, optimism, and a healthy disdain for Pat Narduzzi. Watching it may increase your actual knowledge of actual football.
ITG.
All the pieces are in place for us to have a chance to win it all.
And we're the three best friends that anybody could have.
There's Owen Schmitt in the building.
Like a runaway beer truck down the sidelines.
So where's he in? He in here, Jed Drenning?
I'm not much of an athlete.
The thing that's non-negotiable is playing hard and playing tough.
And Wesley, Valen, Uhler. You are in the gun.
Once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
In the Gun, episode 338 of your new favorite WVU football podcast. I am Wes Uhler, as always, with the best teammates in the business. You've got myself and the signal caller, Jed Drenning, on this edition of ITG. And Jed, we've got plenty to get into. We're going to discuss and dissect the little 24-team college football playoff. Postseason expansion is all the rage right now, right? Happening in March Madness, happening in college football. We'll discuss a little 24-team playoff here. We are going to go around campus and discuss a big few days ahead and a big opportunity at some hardware for WVU baseball. But we do have to as well cover all the latest in the ongoing Brendan Sorsby saga, as we do have an update here to report. But before we get to any and all of that, thanks for tuning in. And we have to give a thank you to our village that makes this all possible right off the jump. Of course, JR, everybody at Team Toothman. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. A big shout out, as always, to our friends at Toothman Ford. A big thank you to a longtime friend of this show, friend in real life, friend of this show, Rick Lewis of Fortis, for roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. You got to visit fortis.us.com. And to our friends of the show, our friends in real life, the good folks at Johnston Equipment. Make sure you're checking them out, Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan. You can also always visit them online. That's Johnston with a T, JohnstonEQ.com. Jed, before we get into some WVU particulars here around campus, certainly the campus in Lubbock there at Texas Tech, anxiously awaiting the outcome of what happens in this ongoing Brendan Sorsby saga. And we do have some updates, some latest here this week.
Reporting on X. Texas Tech quarterback Brendan Sorsby. Of course, we had Texas Tech beat writer Don Williams on the show a few weeks ago to give us the inside scoop on this Sorsby story with the gambling situation. Sorsby has filed an injunction against the NCAA seeking his college eligibility. It cites a, quote, wholesale abandonment of its obligations and duties to promote the well-being of Sorsby. We anticipated litigation in some form. We knew this thing would end up in court. I don't know if this is one of those circumstances where Sorsby's team and his attorneys, his legal team, are hoping to mitigate the damage and maybe cut the penalty down to some extent, because you fully expect him to be done as a college athlete. As we discussed on the episode a few weeks ago when the story broke, there's different levels of infraction with this gambling stuff. It's one thing to bet on your sport, but it's certainly another thing to bet on your team. He did both when he was at Indiana. People forget, before he transferred to Cincinnati, now he's at Texas Tech. He started his career actually as a walk-on at Indiana, and that's where a lot of this took place. And he gambled on one of the Indiana games they didn't even play in, but that's still verboten. That's the cardinal rule. So you would fully expect, much like Hunter Deckers, the Iowa State quarterback 3 years ago, to get jettisoned with extreme prejudice. It's going to be difficult, I would think, to the extreme for him to do something to retain eligibility. I don't know if they're trying to do this to force the issue more quickly so he can decide where he stands in terms of applying for, as we talked about, the supplemental draft with the NFL. But, I just can't imagine a world where you gamble on your own team and you win a case against the NCAA, much like we talked about with Don Williams. What does that set the stage for moving forward? All of a sudden, you're not going to lose all your remaining eligibility if you bet on your team. So it's difficult to imagine that. But either way, he has filed for an injunction against the NCAA, saying that they're not doing right by him. See where this goes, but we wanted to bring it up just to continue with the latest development on a story that we fleshed out pretty well with Don Williams when it first broke, because it's central to all things, and not just in the Big 12 but college football.
Yeah.
Brendan Sorsby.
And just the overarching storylines of gambling and sports and how that line has been blurred more than ever before, Jed, and something that's not going away anytime soon. This is an interesting one, and there's a little bit of time here. I think it's 5 or 6 weeks until he would have to declare for the supplemental draft. So a little bit of time, but in the legal world, 5 or 6 weeks also, that's a pretty quick period. But I have to imagine that
right.
this is again, this is not just of interest to Texas Tech. This is not just of interest to the NCAA and the college football world. This has a lot of bigger ramifications and ripple effect and potential precedent, I think, for a lot of sports in general. So this will be interesting to see how this all plays out over the next month or so.
Not just because he's so high profile, but because so many other athletes are watching this.
Yes.
We talked about in the show, one of the critical pieces that we discussed, the relationship that this generation of players have with gambling is much different than a relationship than Owen had, than I had. It's changed. Everything is so much more accessible. It's right on your phone. You don't need a third party involved. You are the bookie. I mean, when you're 20, 22 years old, it's what a lot of 20 and 22-year-olds do. They sit around with their buddies in college and they make what they view as innocuous and harmless bets on pitches and some of the crazy things he was betting on. It's much different. So, yes, he's high profile, and that does garner a lot of attention, but there are a lot of college athletes paying attention to this case because, first of all, I think it goes on a whole lot more than the average fan might suspect.
Yeah.
But second of all, it's probably a heck of a lot easier to detect than these players might think. So a lot of reasons to stay tuned to this story, and more developments.
Absolutely, and there will be more developments, and we will discuss them as they evolve here and as this story plays out. Let's go around campus before we take our break here on this episode of ITG. Jed, big week ahead for WVU baseball. They closed down the regular season with a series win at home against TCU. They are now the 2 seed for the Big 12 tournament. That gets them a bye into the quarterfinals, which begins on Thursday. Jed, I tell you what, they are in good position to host a regional here. I think if they win a game, certainly 2 in the tournament, they can kind of firmly lock that up. I don't think they have to win the Big 12 tournament to host a regional, but they certainly need to win at least 1 or 2 games here. Good to win the series to end the season. And man, here they are once again for what now? The 3rd or 4th straight year, a real opportunity to go on a postseason run, to maybe even host a regional, and to be playing baseball well into June.
Who the other high seed is in the tournament and what they most recently did to that seed in the Kansas Jayhawks. So I love the tweet that Steve Savins put out. I think we might have shared it in the group, but he talks about the last 5 center fielders for WVU baseball. Brandon White, who's with the Dodgers, Victor Scott, who's with the Cards, we know, Braden Berry with the Blue Jays, Schuyler King with the Red Sox, and meanwhile, Paul Schoenfield making Willie Mays type catches at dead center in Morgantown. So that's a heck of a run, and that's a heck of a recruiting pitch if you're after the next great center fielder right there.
Sure is. Absolutely is. And we are after the next great postseason run here for the WVU baseball team. And listen, Jed, I've got a blood pack with a couple of my boys that whenever it's going to happen one day. It's kind of like I was telling you when we were, back in February when I was pouring my heart out on this show about USA Hockey finally winning a gold medal right on the men's side for the first time in 46 years. I knew it was going to happen in my life at some point. I was supremely confident USA Hockey is good enough, great enough. They will win a gold medal in my lifetime. But I really wanted it to happen in February in Italy against Canada, especially right after what our women had just done to Canada as well. It's going to happen at some point in my lifetime, Jed. WVU is going to go to Omaha and be involved in the College World Series. I am confident as can be that we are good enough as a program that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. But I've got a blood oath with some of my buddies and former roommates, and that whenever we go to Omaha, we're there. And man, I would love this to be the year that I have to, hastily throw together a plane ticket and find my way out to Nebraska here in a few weeks. And they've got a real opportunity to do so. Let's roll the ball out there and see what happens.
Remarkable thing about this program is every time you think they've hit their peak, and that has to be as good as WU baseball gets. Every time they do that in a season, they follow it up with a new peak, with a new high. Right. And it's like, so we haven't played our best baseball as a program yet. And I don't just mean this season, I mean as a program. We continue on that upward trajectory, and it's fun to see where this thing is in fact going to go. And it's hard to dispute what you just said. If that trajectory continues, we're already in the conversation, but where might that end up? Where might it end up this year? Who knows? You get hot at the right time. That's what baseball is all about late in the season, right? So let's see where this thing lands.
Going to be a lot of fun. All the best to Steve Sabins and the boys as they head out to Arizona for the Big 12 tournament, and then hopefully return home to host a regional. And heck, let's dream, maybe even a super regional, right, as well. Before we go to break here and talk some more postseason on the college football side and expansion on the horizon, Jed, I just wanted to give a quick shout out in the spirit of Around Campus here to everyone involved in WVU commencement this past weekend, the class of 2026. First and foremost, of course, being my sister Grace. I'm a little biased, but I was down in Morgantown for the whole weekend, took Friday off work. A bunch of our family went down, rented some places at Cheat Lake, spent the weekend in Morgantown. My sister graduated Saturday at 4:00 at the Coliseum. So we did the Oliverios dinner Friday night, and we did the big family fishbowl pregame on Saturday before graduation. And Saturday night, my sister took me and some of my family members bar hopping down on High Street. Yeah, till about 11:30, all right? And then she put us to bed and went out with her friends for the rest of the night, as the kids do. But just very well done. I mean, I was involved in this, obviously, 13 years ago. I graduated from WVU, but I still, it's impressive, man. Thousands and thousands of kids graduating, thousands of parents and family and friends and loved ones coming into town. It was smooth. It was a great ceremony. And just very well done. And the weather was phenomenal. I think it rained for about an hour on Saturday, but other than that, it was sunshine and beautiful all weekend. So just a big shout out to everyone who graduated. Big thank you to everybody at WVU who I know that's such a production graduation weekend with all the logistics of those thousands of people. Big thank you to everybody on the university side who did a great job with that. And of course, a big shout out and congratulations to my younger sister, Grace, who is on her way to the real world and to her first job in the hospitality management world. But I keep telling her, Jed, don't graduate. Go back and get another major, get a master's, do something. Don't leave. Stay as long as you can.
Congratulations to Grace. And one more cool thing that I noticed making its way on the socials, the new tradition of lighting up the water tower in Evansdale. Cool. That's pretty cool. It makes when something like that happens, you're like, why have we always been doing that, right?
Exactly.
So
right.
That's a cool new tradition, cool new wrinkle too. Graduation weekend is always packed. It's always special. It's always so meaningful for so many of those involved. And you see the pictures making their way online, and it's a special moment for a big group of young folks that are stepping on to bigger things now, including your sister.
Yeah, pretty cool. And I thought, President Benson did a really cool thing at the end of the ceremony. He was like, everyone out there who's a first-time college graduate, first generation college graduate in your family, raise your hand. And it never ceases to amaze. I think WVU and the land grant mission, that's such a cool part of what we do is offering opportunities to a lot of kids from families where education hasn't been at the forefront, hasn't been a priority, hasn't been achievable and attainable. And so well done by everybody involved, Jed. And this to me. Listen, I went to WVU. I think I wear it on my sleeve as much as anybody. I've had dozens of family members before me walk those steps and walk that stage. Heck, my parents met in Morgantown, right? So I'm literally a product of West Virginia University. I wouldn't exist if my parents didn't meet at a sorority and fraternity mixer there in the early 80s. I always get, even now with football games and in the opportunities that I get to go back there and visit my sister and other family members. I've got another cousin who's going to be a freshman, Bella, next year. Shout out to Bella. She was going to go to Fairmont State, but made the right decision to go a few miles north to Morgantown. Morgantown, West Virginia is my home among the hills, like it is for so many of us. And it's always special. It's always emotional. But, graduation weekend, seeing my sister, like I said, 13 years, walking those same steps, that same stage that I did, that so many of our family members have before us. This time with my two daughters with me, right? My 4-year-old and my almost 3-year-old. It was pretty stinking special. And it was a great weekend, a perfect weekend.
Anything to that. That was well said, my friend.
Let's take our break here before I start getting too emotional and tearing up again. When we return on the other side, Jed and I are going to talk a little 24-team college football playoff. What we like, what we don't like, everything that we know at this point. We'll do our best to break it all down when we return. Wes Uhler, Jed Drenning, you are in the gun.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
From first light to the last job done, you need equipment that works as hard as you do. Coyote tractors deliver the power, precision, and durability to take on any task, big or small. And at Johnston Equipment, it's more than just equipment. It's service you can count on. With a full lineup of Coyote tractors and equipment, we'll help you find the perfect fit for your land, your job, your life. Because when your equipment's built right, everything else falls into place.
Visit Johnston Equipment today and come see the Coyote difference for yourself.
Back in the gun here as we roll along on this episode of ITG. Jed, we have seen in the last, week or two, the official expansion of the NCAA tournament. And inevitably, right on his heels is going to be the expansion of the college football playoff. 12-team playoff, it's going to be in and out real quick. At least we had about a decade of the 4-team playoff. 12-team playoff, though, Jed, it seems is going to be pretty short-lived. As, again, this just feels inevitable at this point, just kind of waiting for the final shoe to drop and for this all to become official.
Let's remind folks of how this all came to be to begin with the gun door head moment of allowing the SEC and the Big Ten be the authorities in deciding what the media deal, or what the playoff structure, I should say, not the media deal, what the playoff structure or the postseason structure will in fact look like. That was signed off on. So much of this, whether we like it or not, as folks who are attached to the Big 12, we just don't have the say that the Big 10 and the SEC has, because we've granted them that say. Now, interestingly enough, we blinked 5 minutes ago and we just expanded to 12 teams, and we're going to talk about that. Well, now what they recognized in the jump from 4 to 12 is how much new revenue was created. So they're connecting those dots with the revenue streams. Let's start with the fact that I think the definitive piece in recent days on this topic was written by Bill Conley at ESPN.com. And we're going to draw a lot from Bill Conley's piece. He did a really good job fleshing all of this out. But how this all came to be, the Big Ten was the first to make an overture toward its interest in a 2014 playoff, not expanding from 12 to 16, but jumping on out to 24. Start with this. Their internal documents had an outline talking about expanding to 16 teams by 27 or 28, and then by 24 teams no later than 2029. Remember, the current media contract runs through 2031. Now, one of the first interesting points of this, ESPN has all the rights to all the current games. But if you're expanding to 24 teams, you're creating a whole lot of games that weren't part of that deal, which will be open for bid to new suitors. So whether it's Fox or whoever else wants to come in, CBS. But the Big Ten made the first push or mention toward this. Brett Yormark of the Big 12 was all about it. He said, hey, I'm for it. Let's again pivot back. I keep jumping ahead of myself here and explain what, in fact, this format would look like. There's no auto bids in this 24-team format. That's something that I really don't like. But here's what this would look like. It will be the top 23 ranked teams. And by ranked, I mean power conference teams, the 4-power conference, plus the highest ranked mid-major team, if they aren't already ranked in the top 24. So, for example, the instance that can give you some clarity on what this would look like. Last year, despite winning the ACC, Duke actually didn't finish in that top 24, so Duke would not have made it to the playoffs. This is not a conference champion auto bid type thing.
Right.
It's an at-large thing, very heavy. 23 of 24 spots would be at-large, with one spot reserved for the group of 5, group of 6, whatever we're going to call them this week. So that's what it would look like, which Brett Yormark of the Big 12 said, hey, I kind of like the sounds of that when Tony Petitti of the Big 10 brought it up. Well, Jim Phillips of the ACC was initially reluctant, but then he came around as well. So the lone holdout was, you might argue, the holdout that matters the most, and that's Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference. He was reluctant. And what's happened since then, we're hitting the time of year, Wes, where you're starting to have conferences are starting to have their spring meetings. Like right now as we speak, I think the Big Ten is actually underway with their conference meetings out in California. The SEC, I think they'll hold theirs later this month, usually around Memorial Day. So these discussions are going to be taking place at these conference meetings. Brett Yormark's on board, Jim Phillips on board, Tony Petitti's on board, but Greg Sankey, not so much. However, you've started to hear certain prominent voices on the coaching side in the SEC. Kirby Smart, for example, of Georgia, saying, you know what, I don't think 24 is such a bad thing, such a bad idea. Now, the argument can be made, of course, by the coaches that to them maybe it represents relative job stability. If there's 24 teams allowed in, well, at least you can argue that you're building towards something instead of being the one team that 3 years in a row barely gets boxed out and costs you your job. I don't know if that would work or wouldn't work. I mean, there's guys still getting fired, winning double digits, but that's a conversation for another day. But right now, you have to look at the pros and the cons of doing this. So that's who's on board and who isn't quite on board yet. And we will know more, I would imagine, as these spring meetings come to a close. But first and foremost, you're talking about with 24 teams, the way it would be structured on the calendar, 9 through 24 would play in the first round, while 1 through 8 would get a bye.
Yeah.
So this would be 5 rounds for those first round teams. 5 games, 5 weeks. So one of the first things you need to look to do is shorten the season, the regular season. So that's why there's been such heavy discussion of potentially starting all games in what we call week 0. That week before everybody else starts, where certain one-off start, like the teams playing abroad, last year K-State and Iowa State. There's always that short list handful of games in week 0, but we're talking about a week before Labor Day. You'd have to move all the games back to week 0. and start then. I guess then it would officially be no longer be week 0, it would be week 1.
Right.
And you also might have to explore the possibility of doing away with the conference championship games. Because again, you would need to find a way to shorten not just the regular season, but the conference title games attached to the regular season. So those are probably the most salient points to start the conversation with before we flesh this out further. But what are your general thoughts? What did I miss topically, Wes, in terms of the bones of this thing and what it's supposed to look like if, in fact, it plays out? It's gaining steam, and it does look like there's a better chance than not, even though one of the reasons to pump the brakes, people are complaining. I mean, we're going to get into the pros and the cons of it. People are complaining about it will further diminish the value of the regular season, as if that hasn't been diminished already. I would argue that in many instances, the value of the regular season was always overhyped. You couldn't lose a game unless you had the right brand on your helmet, and then you could lose a game. So anyway, topically, did I miss any of the bones of this, Wes, before we move on further?
Yeah, I don't think you missed any of the bones of it. I think you're right. I think what's left is kind of the pros and cons and what you like about it and what you don't like about it. And certainly the regular season and the ripple effects there is a big piece of that conversation. And you and I have kind of in the past, listen, we've debated that stuff. You and I am not on the side of completely this will ruin the regular season. I'm not on the side of completely the regular season has always been compromised and it's been a little overrated in that standpoint. I do agree with a lot of what you say in terms of the regular season mattered more for certain teams than others based on the logo on the side of your helmet. I do think though that there was still a tighter regular season then, even when that was the case. That's now going to completely go out the way. Like, what happens? I don't know if you want to go down this road just yet, or if I'm jumping the gun here. But like, what happens with Ohio State and Michigan when they play the last week of the regular season, and they're both going to be in the playoff regardless of what happens? You know, like those type of things. But my biggest thing, Jed, is I could tell you all the cons. I don't know what the pros are other than you used that word at the very start of the segment, revenue. I think they saw those revenues from 4 to 12, and there's no denying this will make more money. I also, I've maintained this when we kind of talk the state of college football. I don't care about that. I don't care about ESPN and Fox and CBS and NBC and the Big Ten and the SEC commissioners getting richer. That does nothing for me. I want what's best for the sport. I know I'm just a dreamer. I know in 2026 that doesn't matter anymore. That toothpaste is way out of the tube. But the only pro that I can think of is that I would love for you to tell me another pro rather than just the rich get richer. And I mean, I realize that you could, as WVU, this gives you a greater chance to get in. If you're someone like Virginia Tech or Pitt or Louisville, this gives you a greater chance to get in. But man, I think it was Jed. I think it was Bill Connolly of ESPN who had the line, "This college football 2014 playoff format feels a lot like all these AI and data centers. Like nobody is asking for this. Nobody wants this, but you're getting it and be ready for it."
That's true. First of all, when you said dreamer, the way you said that, I couldn't help but think of Dinner for Schmucks. Dinner for Schmucks. He talks about, Bill Connolly does, he talks about the Ohio State-Michigan game, and here's what he doesn't necessarily say as much about it, but he talked about it leading up to that point he was making. He was saying, look, expansion was supposed to lead to more meaningful non-conference games, and it really kind of sort of didn't. The Texas-Ohio State opener last year, it was terribly meaningful because ultimately it ended up knocking one of those teams out of the playoff, but we didn't know it. At the time, you didn't know that. So it's not like people were watching that game because they knew the loser was going to be knocked out of the playoffs.
Same with Miami and Notre Dame early in the season, right?
Same with Miami and Notre Dame. Same type of thing. You didn't know that. But if you look at the Ohio State-Michigan situation, you had a circumstance a couple years ago where Ohio State suffered a meltdown in its rivalry game against Michigan. And because of the new 12-team format, was given grace, allowed in, and went on to win the national championship. Now, this isn't a discussion about, well, therefore they proved they should be in. No, there's teams that don't get in that could win. That's not what this is about. But in the old format, they would have been out for sure. Whereas I would argue that maybe in the old format, a West Virginia, Virginia Tech would have been out much sooner than an Ohio State or Michigan by a loss. They lost to the wrong team in October, whereas Ohio State or Michigan was allowed to lose to that team. That's the problem I fundamentally had with it. Stop telling me how much the regular season mattered as if it matters the same for everyone. It never did. It mattered what brand was on your helmet. That's how much grace you were afforded. But let's take Ohio State winning that national championship. Okay, that was with a 12-team format after losing to Michigan, right? Well, now let's extrapolate that out to 24 teams. Now they're going to be saying, oh, well, Ohio State and Michigan are going to be resting their players because they both know they're really? Do you want to do that when seeding matters and home field is on the line? And even if you're still going to get a home field game, okay, are you going to get a home field game against now a team with a higher seed that might beat you versus if you take care of your business and you're the number 2 seed playing at home against the lower seeded team? There's home field will always matter. So you're going to be playing to the bitter end of the regular season to secure the absolute highest seed you can get. And I would hope that whatever the committee looks like, it punishes you for tanking. Why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't it punish you for tanking? You want to rest your players because you think, heck, we're the number 2 seed. We're automatically in. Well, I'd love to see you drop out of the top 8 and have to play an extra game because you did that.
Sure. No, I like the way you're laying this out. I do. I mean,
maybe even Jed, you're on the road.
Yeah, to me, and again, I'm the dreamer. I'm the romantic, right? Like if we have a 24-team playoff, hell, even if we have a 12-team playoff, 13-9 doesn't matter. That loss to Pitt in 2007 doesn't matter. Our road's a little more difficult, and maybe we don't get the first round bye.
Nearly as much. That's right.
The kick 6 Auburn against Alabama in 2013 doesn't matter, But again, maybe this is just the natural kind of evolution of sports. I don't know. In my lifetime when I was born, Jed, only 4 teams made the playoffs in baseball, right? The division winners. You went right to the NLCS and right to the ALCS. I don't seem to hear a bunch of people hearkening back to those days. So I don't know. Maybe I do think I'm still stuck in kind of like that. It comes down to the wire. It's Thanksgiving time. It's rivalry week, and you've got Pitt and WVU with ramifications, and you've got Ohio State and Michigan, you've got Alabama and Auburn, and you've got all these different things. But I guess just the ramifications of the game change. It's not necessarily the same thin margin for error that it used to be, but there's still a lot up for grabs. There's still seeding. There's still home field advantage. So I actually, you've made me feel a little bit better here.
I've always felt that the evolution that this has undergone, 2 teams was far too restrictive, because when you are allowing human beings to vote on a poll that dictates which 2 teams go, you talk about bias toward blue bloods. You will never again experience in sports the level of bias toward blue bloods that for 100 years we suffered through with college football. So many things had to go your way. I mean, even when West Virginia made it to the national championship in 1988, look at the help of the blue bloods stumbling that we had to have. Otherwise, even that team would have gotten screwed out of that opportunity. They would have found a way because we didn't have the right thing on our helmet. We needed the help of all those other blue bloods stumbling in a way they didn't typically stumble for the stars to align and us to get a chance to play Notre Dame. That was even before the BCS, when 1 was strictly pitted against 2. You had to get lucky enough the way the bowl system was structured for the right team in the right bowl to play 1 versus 2. We weren't number 2. We were number 3. Miami was number 2, and we played number 1 Notre Dame. And I still say, had we beaten Notre Dame, we'd have probably had a split national championship because of the bias.
Yeah.
Here is what got me. When you expanded beyond the 2 teams to the 4 teams, to me, that was the worst case scenario. 4 wasn't better, it was worse, because all 4 teams did was take those 6 or 8 blue bloods that are always in the conversation, pre-NIL, pre-portal, that could harvest the greatest talent in the country, have the 3 best players at every position, have Tua backing up Jalen Hurts to come off the bench and win a national championship, have the 5 best receivers in the country on the same team in Alabama. You used to be able to do that. There were 6 or 8 teams that had a realistic chance to even get there and compete. All the 4 team did was build in kind of an insurance situation for those 4 teams that if they blinked, they were allowed a shot to blink not a second time and still be one of the 6 or 8 that had a realistic chance. It further boxed everybody out because they harvested all the talent and they were able to tell all the recruits, hey, if you want to go to the playoffs, everybody wants to play on the biggest stage. Well, there's only 6 or 8 teams that get to go to the playoffs, and we're one of them. So it made it worse than ever. It made it worse than ever. If you were a kid from Southern California and you had playoff aspirations, look at Alabama's roster and see where their quarterbacks came from. You weren't going to USC. Why? Because USC never went to the playoffs. They weren't an SEC team. They weren't a Big Ten team. Look at the Big Ten's players from out west. So those kids wanted to play in the postseason, so they had to choose between those 6 or 8 teams that harvested all the talent and boxed everybody else out because it was no longer a 2-team format. It was a 4-team format, and they were allowed to lose a game. West Virginia couldn't lose a game, but Alabama could lose a game because it was against a ranked SEC team that probably shouldn't have been ranked. But West Virginia couldn't get away with that. The SEC schools could. Some of the Big Ten schools could. That's why the 4-team was more problematic than anything. So I saw the 12-team expansion a step in the right direction. Now, you could argue as to whether or not you think it's enough. I thought it was getting close. I really felt that way. And to be honest with you, I'd look you in the face and say, I think 16 is more ideal if structured correctly, but I'd rather hear about 24 than hear about 4 again. I'd rather hear about, I'll entertain the 24 conversation more than I ever would of the 4, and boxing everybody else out, just letting 6 or 8 blue bloods dominate more than they already do. But if you look to a 24-team playoff, the thing that got my attention the most, and I'm probably a 16-team guy, to be honest with you. I think if you structure it right, you have to structure it right. That's the key. Because if you don't, there will be, I don't want to call them meaningless games because seeding is always going to matter, but games that shouldn't mean as much as they should if it's structured correctly with a 16-team playoff. But with 24 teams, the thing that got my attention was this. My biggest complaint has always been, back in the old days, only 6 or 8 teams, maybe 10, had a consistent chance to be in the conversation and draw the top talent in the country because they were the only teams in the conversation. Who was it, Wes, the account that laid out on Twitter the teams that would have made a 24-team playoff?
Yeah.
If you go back to 2014, the reason he started in 2014 was that's when the 4-team CFP started. So since 2014, he listed all the teams that would have made the playoffs and how many times those teams would have made it. Wes, there's 80 teams on this list that would have made it at least once. West Virginia would have made it twice. I went back and checked, I believe, not just was it 2016, 2018, because think of it like this. What you have to do is you have to look at the playoff rankings at the end of the conference championship weekend. And I think both times we were number 16, meaning in that first round we would have hosted number 17. One year I think we would have hosted Utah. One year I think we would have hosted Florida. Okay, so and there's 80 teams having that conversation. And there's 80 teams who can look at a recruit and say, hey, yeah, that's something we do too. Sometimes we're in there, not as consistently as Alabama and Ohio State, who've both been in it 12 times.
Yeah, that was the craziest part to me, is that Alabama and Ohio State both would have been in every single year. That's just nuts.
It's like Duke being in the tournament 24 straight times in basketball. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Duke was in the NCAA tournament 24 straight times.
Jed, that's the type of greed they talk about in the Bible, brother. My goodness.
It is. It absolutely is. But the fact that 80 different fan bases can at least start the season with a conversation, because it's happened before. I don't care if I'm looking at this, Temple, Liberty, Illinois. Don't preach to me. They have no chance to win it. They have this, they have that. Look, rebellions are built on hope. At least tell me going into the season, the most meaningful tournament that there is in college sports, this will be in football. At least I have a chance to be there. Tell me later how I have no chance to win it. That's up to me to decide,
You're
right?
warming me up a little bit here, Jed.
That's to me to decide I have no chance. Okay. Well, guess what? If you never allow any of these teams in, you're never going to have any of these types of potential upsets ever. And I'm not going to say it's going to happen regularly. That's the beauty of an upset. They happen so irregularly, you don't see them coming. But I like the idea of this being for the all and not just for the few. And West Virginia being in 2 times, think about it. I mean, I would consider, since 2014, that's not exactly the apex of West Virginia football. We've been pretty marginal by West Virginia standards, right? Not poor, but marginal. We've been a 500 program or so, with a couple exceptions outside of that. It's not like every year we're going 2-10, but we've just been kind of a 500 program or so outside of these, 2018 with Will Greer before, things skidded down the stretch, the 10-win season 2016. So just imagine if we get things amped back up again, we're regularly in the conversation as we should be. Whereas I'm not so sure with a 4-team, or maybe to some extent a 12 teams, there's a looking to box other Big 12 teams out. That's as true. But again, I'm more sold on a 16 team, because even if you mushroom it to 16 teams, the number of teams you look at that would have a realistic chance of making it in is far greater than the 6 or 8 or 10 blue bloods that, outside of a Cincinnati squeezing in one year, are the only ones to ever get in. That I want to open it up to other teams. Why?
All right.
Is because I want recruits attracted to as many programs as possible as a playoff destination. There's always going to be blue bloods. There's always going to be an advantage the blue bloods have. But can't you at least mitigate it to that extent that a kid looks at a program and says, oh, yeah, West Virginia sometimes makes the playoffs. They're not always boxed out like 80% of the country, forcing me to choose one of 10 teams if I want to play in the playoffs. I like that.
Jed, I like everything that you're laying out, honestly. You've done a pretty good job of convincing me, but there's just one piece of this, and maybe you'll call me cynical, but I think the proof is in the pudding from just what we've seen in the short 12-team playoff, and you just kind of referenced it. We see right now, we don't need to kid ourselves, the bottom half of these SEC and Big Ten teams that are getting ranked for no reason, right? These programs that are going 8-4 and still getting ranked. These teams that are going 9-3 and their 3 losses are against the only good teams that they've played and they're still getting ranked. We've seen a ton of this the last couple years in the SEC and in the Big Ten. My only thing with this is you're right. This should expand access. We have what it would have looked like since 2014, but I'm also not naive enough to think that they'll start fudging with that going forward, meaning that they won't rank. They'll rank an 8-4 Iowa team ahead of a 10-2 Utah team. They'll rank a 9-3 Auburn team ahead of an 11-1 BYU team. They'll rank 9-3 USC ahead of 10-2 Louisville. That I know is going to happen, and that is going to piss me off royally, because it's going to be the same church, different pew, of the helmet mattering more than the results, and particularly the conference backing you if you're not one of the best handful of teams in the country. So, in theory, I want to give you credit. I hate, double hate, triple hate, loathe entirely, right? Isn't that the line from the Grinch and Jim Carrey about how he feels about Christmas? That's how I felt about this 2014 playoff before you and I started recording. And you have warmed me up to it here over the course of these last 45 minutes or however long we've been doing this. That's my only thing, though, is when 8-4 Iowa jumps 10-2 Utah, or when 9-3 Michigan jumps 11-win Louisville or Virginia or Duke, because that's going to happen too.
Well, it's going to be worse than that, Wes. And what do I always fall back to with all these conversations? So long as a committee is deciding this, it is going to be profoundly flawed in a way it doesn't have to be. As long as you allow human beings with all their biases to sit in a room and there's no transparency and they decide with backdoor conversations behind closed doors, it's always going to be kind of sort of awful, really. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's going to be Olympic figure skating on
I was waiting until you were going to say the Russian figure skating judge. That's what it's going to
be. And I hate the Olympic figure skating judges' dimension of it, the eye test. Nothing drives me crazier than the phrase eye test. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. play it on the field. That's the ultimate eye test. And quit telling me you did play it on the field during the regular season. No, you absolutely did not, because you do not apply the same standard across the board. And it's almost impossible to do so. But please stop demeaning us by telling us there is a playoff. It's called the regular season. No, there absolutely is not, because the same standard doesn't come close to applying to all brands. So that's the issue I have with this. 23 at-larges is the most flawed possible solution you can come up with. That's way worse, way worse. First of all, it's ironic I'm selling you on it, because I'm not a big fan of 24 teams. I really don't think I am. I'd rather have 16, but I want auto bids. I want it definitively structured. Going into the season, hey, if I finish in third place in my conference, I have a play-in game against the team that finishes here. And no judge can take that away from me, no matter how ugly I looked on the field. It's all based on scores and results. And if you want to leave a couple slots open so you can make excuses for Notre Dame when they're not at their best, have at it. So long as the auto bids are built in, and the vast majority of the teams in the playoff field aren't determined by judges. This is 23 out of 24 being determined by judges, because, Wes, I'll take it a step further what you said. Not only will a 9-3 SEC team leapfrog a 10-2 Louisville, but you'll even have in the midst, once the poll starts in October, you'll even have circumstances where mysteriously a 6-3 Missouri team will be ranked 5 or 6 spots higher than it should be, even though it's the middle of the regular season. Why? Because the committee sees that Missouri's playing Alabama in 2 weeks, and they want to make sure Alabama has a chance to say they beat that nice ranked Missouri team that shouldn't have been ranked as high as they were. It's worse than just leapfrogging teams. It's setting the table for overinflating other teams so you can make a more justifiable case in the eyes of the committee for the teams that they choose to be there by virtue of being a blue blood. That's what drives me insane. That's always going to happen. It's just a matter of degree. How much will it happen? And with this, that's why this is atrocious, the 24 teams, unless it's restructured and it's auto bids on some level. 23 at-large bids, nobody is ever going to convince me, oh, well, that means everybody's going to have an equitable or fair chance to get in. No, they're not. No, they're not. That means some conference champions are going to get boxed out. I just told you the ACC champion Duke last year wouldn't have made it. And the committee would have smiled like the butcher's dog in boxing Duke out to allow another SEC or Big Ten team in. Yep. So now I'll entertain different numbers in terms of auto bids. I've said this before. If you want to go 16 teams, do we live in a world where everybody that can fog a mirror has their own opinion in terms of what it should look like with the playoffs, right? But that's the world we live in. I've said this many times, and I'll say it again. 16 teams, auto bids built in. I don't care if you go 4-3. If you want to give the SEC and the Big Ten some sort of advantage, they offered a couple years ago 4-2. 4 auto bids Big Ten, 4 auto bids SEC, 2 each for the ACC and the Big 12. Nobody wanted that except the SEC and the Big Ten. But if you want to go 4-3, I'm willing to make that concession, because now you can structure your conference championship weekend to play play-in games. Okay, we're going to talk here in a second about the flex weeks, and we'll close with that they talked about as a possibility to set this up as an offset to the problems created by no conference championship games. But if you have a 16-team playoff, if you have 4 auto bids for the Big Ten, 4 auto bids for the SEC, they're only going to agree to what makes the most money. I mean, everybody's going to say, well, the SEC never go for that. They're going to go for whatever makes the most money. That's it. If you could convince them that fewer SEC teams would make more money, that's the only way they'd agree to it. But if you give them 4 teams each in the Big 12 and the ACC 3 teams each, and you play in through conference championship weekend, take, for instance, in the Big 12, if you're allowing 3 Big 12 teams auto bids, guess what that means going into championship weekend? Whoever's ranked number 1 in the Big 12 after the regular season closes, they're out. They're automatically in the playoffs, and they're sitting out waiting on everybody else. Now, what about the 2nd and 3rd auto bid from the Big 12? Okay, 2 plays 6, or excuse me, 2 plays 5 and 3 plays 4. And the winners advance, and there's your 3 teams in the Big 12. It's structured. It's set in a formula. The committee has less than zero to do with determining. If they say, well, hey, Iowa State, yeah, they beat Kansas State in that, but they looked kind of ugly doing it. Screw you. Nobody cares. They won. They knew going in it was a 2 versus a 5, and all they had to do was win it, and they are in. You can't take it away no matter what the logo on their helmet is. So that's why I'd be more for something like that.
Yeah.
And you just hit on the single biggest problem I had with this 2014 or any other format. If it is at large heavy, it's always going to be a major, major problem.
Jed, you're going to have a team like Tennessee last year who was ranked in the top 20 all year just because they lost to good teams. I mean, like Tennessee beat nobody with a pulse, but was still ranked in the top 20 all year just so they could prop up that Vanderbilt win at the end of the season to try and get Vandy into the college football playoff. It was an absolute joke, and you're going to have more of that, certainly. But yeah, I like what you said, and I don't want to tease this too much, but a couple weeks from now, we're going to have a fun episode where Wes is going to fix college football, right? I've done this whole outline of how I would change college football, but just to give a teaser, it's kind of along the lines of what you said, Jed. I would have 8 conferences. Okay, there'd be 8 conferences across the country based on regionality. Imagine that, much like the NFL does with their divisions. But the NFL has 8 divisions of 4 teams. We'd double that to expand upon it. Your conference champion automatically goes to the playoffs. Your second and your third seed play as a play-in game, kind of like what replaces what used to be the conference championship games. Now it's the 2 versus the 3. Bang. The winner of that, you get 2 teams from each of the 8 conferences for a 16-team playoff. That's how I did that without giving away too much. That's how I did it. 8 divisions in college football, 8 conferences. First place automatically goes to the playoffs. Second and third place play a play-in game, and you end up with a 16-team playoff. I'm good with any, I don't care what the number is. If it's 12, if it's 14, if it's 16, if it's 18, 20, 22, 24, as long as it's not a Russian figure skating judge. If we get to that point, I'm fine with whatever the number is.
Where I'm at. Matter of fact, if you wanted to go back to 4, the only way I'd be cool with that if that was auto bids.
Yeah,
because as long as you have
exactly right. Notre Dame joined.
As long as you have the Olympic figure skating dimension, it will always be kind of sort of terrible. And there were many times, even at the height of college football, it wasn't as good as it should be because of the biases of people voting on things. Or just that was the nature of it. And they talked about, Wes, and we'll close with this, flex weeks maybe being a solution to, first of all, in the 4 conference championship games in the power conferences, they generate $250 million. So you have to at least come up with that much money to start from what you're giving up. So if you're not going to have conference championship games, how do you make more money than that? Well, one of the things they've talked about doing is you saw some version of this. In 2020 during the COVID season, the Big Ten tried to do it, but it didn't work out because positive COVID tests destroyed the whole thing. They were trying to jam as many games in as they could, and they were going to let other teams play during conference championship week. But the Pac-12, the newly formed Pac-12, this season in 2026 is looking at doing this. They're going to have 8 conference games, and then they're going to have an open week for all conference teams the week before their conference championship game. Now, what they're going to do is have a flex week that week. They're going to structure matchups that are most favorable to the conference that week. First of all, to sort out the better standings. I mean, you'd have had a 4-way SEC tie in the regular season last year if you wouldn't have a conference championship. Well, here's one way to offset that. Play the meaningful games, and you might even schedule a game. If you think a team's on the fringe of the playoffs and needs another good win, give them a chance.
Yeah.
Schedule another good team, okay? Schedule the weak teams against the weak teams, the good teams against the good teams, and do that week to sort out who is, in fact, going to play in your conference championship game. But you could do some version of that at each league and each conference, but you're going to have to do something. And we haven't even mentioned Army and Navy. I mean, they still deserve their own kind of spot. And right now it's in early December, and that would be difficult to manage as well. But that's a lot of people say, well, heck with Army and Navy. I'm not one of those guys. I think Army and Navy is as college football through and through as you can get. So I think you have to do something to protect that as well. But that's the long and short of it. That's some of the high points that Bill Connolly hit in the article. There's a lot of cons to it. The major, super major con is always going to be if a committee is deciding things on an at-large basis with the overwhelming majority of the playoff teams in the field. That's a major, major problem. So you have to come up with a way to show the SEC and the Big Ten that's not how you make the most money, because people are going to say, well, they're going to say no to that. The only thing the SEC and the Big Ten are going to say yes to is the thing that makes them the most money. So that's what you got to position it as.
Hey, that's the same thing the NFL had to do, right? Was it Pete
In the
Rozelle?
60s.
Pete Rozelle in the 60s, who, convinced New York and Chicago and LA that, if they really wanted to make money, they had to let Green Bay and Pittsburgh and some of these smaller markets sit at the table too. Yeah, I think the minds and the suits that run college football could take a lesson from that one. But this was a lot of fun, Jed. This is a good conversation. And much like we've said many times with this topic, like we said at the start of the show with Brendan Sorsby, this story is far from concluded. We will make sure to keep you updated with all the twists and turns and the finality of this thing and inevitably the next wave of expansion of the college football playoff. But that will do it, Jed, for this edition of ITG. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. For our producer and co-host, Schuyler Callihan. For the runaway beer truck, sharp-dressed barbecuing man, Big Owen Schmitt. He's Jed Drenning. I'm Wes Uhler. The one thing we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. Take care, everybody. We will talk to you soon. You've been In the Gun.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.